Hello, this is Zahir Alum. Welcome you on Frankly Speaking. My guest today is Mr. Robert Watkins, UN Resident Coordinator and UNDP Resident Representative in Bangladesh. Robert Watkins took up his office here in Bangladesh February 2015. He brings with him more than 30 years of experience in development and post-conflict recovery program areas, the last 10 years of which with the United Nations. Prior to his appointment, Mr. Watkins served as Deputy Special Coordinator for Lebanon, where he was also UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator from February 2011. He also served as the Deputy Special Representative of the UN Secretary General in Afghanistan from 2009 to 2011, and the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator in the Republic of Georgia from 2006 to 2009. We welcome Robert Watkins, UN Resident Coordinator in Bangladesh.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
My pleasure.
I know you are a long serving UN resident coordinator, and you have many years of experience with working in different organizations, including United Nations.
Yes.
So, would you please share your experience when working in Bangladesh since joining February 2015?
Well, it's coming up to 2 years now. It's been a very hectic, very rich and very challenging 2 years, I have to say. Bangladesh is a unique country in that it faces so many challenges on the one hand, and on the other hand, it has made such incredible progress since its creation in 1971, in a very short period of time, really. And it's kind of an experiment in state making. You know, this is a new country. It faced incredible challenges when it was created. It grew out of a conflict, a violent conflict with Pakistan that has really shaped the character of the country. And I think that's in fact one of the things that has impressed me the most that I have seen here is how deep those feelings still are. This is not something that happened in the far past that people, you know, grandparents talk about with their children. This is something that people live every day, and it's constantly in people's minds. They're reminded about it in the media. Many of the festivals that take place, for instance, you know, the celebration of the Bangla language, that is such a strong part of the culture and so deeply rooted in the founding of this nation, which, while it happened a long time ago, as I say, is still very present in the moment.
But since its independence, we have been experiencing rapid economic growth, robust economic growth. Bangladesh is growing in many fields.
Yes.
At the same time, you mentioned in your first impression that there are so many challenges as well. So, yeah. What are the challenges you see from the UN perspective in Bangladesh?
Well, let me first address that question about this living in the origins of the country. Well, I think it's very important, and my specialty at university was history. I studied many years of history. So I'm very interested in this question. I'm very interested in historical questions. And I think that has given a great source of strength to Bangladesh in terms of what kind of a country it is, what kind of a country it wants to be, where it wants to go. And I think it has fueled this strong economic growth and the achievement of so many goals in a short period of time. Yeah. But at the same time, I see that as, in fact, a big challenge facing the country insofar as people have to let go of the past a little bit too and look more towards the future. And that, in fact, is one of the biggest challenges that Bangladesh is going to be facing in the next century, is the fact that I think in the next 20 years, there will be more people under the age of 25 than over the age of 25. Yeah. So there's this huge youth bulge that is coming into Bangladesh. And
that's an advantage for this country.
It can be. But
if we can translate it.
Exactly, if you can channel it in a constructive way. And it's going to be a huge challenge for jobs for these people. It's going to be a huge challenge to give them the kind of education that they're going to need for what we hope will be an economy that continues to develop very quickly. Now, you mentioned that it's a fast-growing economy, and it has shown incredible growth, 6% over the last 10 years at least, which is very, very strong. we also have to keep in mind that that is coming from a very low base. After the War of Independence in 1971, the country was absolutely devastated by that conflict. So it was starting from a very low base, and it has very quickly grown. But in order to maintain that growth and to, in fact, even lift it higher, a lot of changes are going to have to come about. And those are some of the other challenges that you're going to be facing. One of the things I've noticed here is how difficult it is to get around. Not only in Dhaka, the problems of traffic are well known to everyone. I won't talk about that. But to get around the country, it's not a big country, but to get from Dhaka to Chittagong, it takes up to 6 hours. To get to Rangamati, it takes another 2 or 3 hours. I mean, they're not so far away, but the network of roads in the country is still very underdeveloped. And I think if you're going to keep this and increase that economic development, there's going to have to be much more investment in infrastructure. Roads is just one example, but it comes with airplanes and rail lines and buses and so on. Energy. Okay. There's a huge demand on energy, and you know there's a big debate now about the Rampal coal plant. But the reality is that if you don't have new sources of energy, you won't be able to provide the energy that these new factories are going to require in order to continue that development. We've seen the ravages of mismanagement of the environment. You know, you don't have to go beyond Dhaka to see the problems of waterlogging that we have here, which, you know, it's not just a question of drainage, it's a question of the management of canal systems, rivers, and lakes and streams, which Dhaka has been known for in its glory days, but which now sadly are just the recipients of sewage and waste, apart from land grabbing. So lots of challenges in that area. We're looking at climate change, how important that is in Bangladesh already. I've seen statistics, I'm sure you've seen them before already, that if we keep the same pace of change in the climate, that 40% of Bangladesh is going to be submerged. The Bay of Bengal is going to rise up and submerge 40% of the country. That's going to have a huge impact on a country which is...
So under the given challenging realities, in terms of promoting our economic interest, what type of support or assistance we are receiving, or the UN organs or the agencies are extending to confront those challenges in Bangladesh?
Well, the UN has a long history in Bangladesh. In fact, the UN has been present in Bangladesh even before it became a nation, before 1971. But of course, in 1971, with independence and with the floods which came shortly thereafter, the presence of the UN became more manifest. From that time, even up until the present day, there's been a huge assistance on the part of the UN in terms of delivering humanitarian aid, whether it be food or shelters, you know, supporting the government in the delivering of this very much needed relief in times of cyclones and floods and so on. That has remained a constant. Okay. But where the UN agencies, where I think we have really made a difference, because while we've helped save lives with this humanitarian aid, I think where we have really helped the government, the successive governments of Bangladesh, is basically in the area of economic development. And we have seen the performance of Bangladesh in achieving the Millennium Development Goals, you know, set in 2000 up until 2015. Bangladesh has really been one of the star performers. It could have done better, but show me a country that couldn't have done better.
The progress has been remarkable.
Progress has been remarkable. We've seen gender parity with boys and girls in terms of primary and secondary school enrollment. We've seen life expectancy rise from 54 years up into to 70 years. We've seen infant mortality drop. Definitely. We've seen poverty reduced from 57%
that's significant.
To 24% in the last 20 years. I mean, that's,
but whether Bangladesh is prepared to achieve the next goals which was set under the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, whether it would be possible for Bangladesh or the global community, we will discuss it after taking a short break.
Okay.
Dear viewers, welcome back. You're watching Frankly Speaking. My guest is Robert Watkins, UN Resident Coordinator. Mr. Robert Watkins, we were talking about some of the impressive progress Bangladesh have made on Millennium Development Goals, but the challenges are to how to achieve the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and how to handle so many developmental goals by 2030. So, how, in your view, how Bangladesh have started on the way to achieving SDGs by 2030?
Well, first of all, you've got to have good planning. That's the start of any achievement. I think we've started off very well, very solidly on that ground. The UN has been working very closely with the government of Bangladesh to put together some targets and indicators for achievement of the SDGs. The government has worked out a 7th five-year plan, as you saw in last July. It became operative. We've been working very closely with the government to ensure that the SDGs are integrated into that 7th five-year plan. So I feel very confident that the necessary steps have been taken to put a plan into place to achieve those goals in the next 15 years. But a plan, of course, is not enough in itself. It's a good starting point, but you've got to have other things. You've got to have finance. I think financing the SDGs is going to be one of the biggest challenges Bangladesh and many other countries is going to face, because the kinds of money that are going to be required are far greater than what was used in achieving the Millennium Development Goals. On top of that, there's going to have to be a lot more investment in some of the areas that I just mentioned earlier, in energy, in infrastructure, in education, and so on. These are going to be essential ingredients to make sure that the youth of today has the skills that are going to be needed for the new economy. And there's going to have to be a system put into place which will allow the economy to grow.
So inevitably, these are the developmental challenges we need to get over. I mean, the barriers, obstacles, whatever we have in front of us. But what is in your view that developing institutions or the issue of governance or the state of democracy, how critically important is that to grow a country like Bangladesh towards achieving or meeting a target of middle-income countries?
I think there are two other factors which are very important, one of which you just mentioned, governance, and the other one is security. There can be no development anywhere in the world unless there is a secure and safe environment in which people feel safe and comfortable to develop. Just as governance is important too. People have to believe that the rule of law is in place and will protect both their own selves as well as their businesses, their enterprises. They have to feel that they will be treated equally before the law and that the rule of law will stand. And this is part of the challenge of governance. Coupled with that is the problem of corruption. We know that there is a problem of corruption in Bangladesh, and it drains away a lot from what could be used for investing in expanding the economy further. We have political problems in the country where there is not a total buy-in with the political process. There is an opposition which feels that it has been disenfranchised, and we have to find ways that we can get the ruling party and the opposition parties to come together to agree on a way forward. If there's constant fighting between political parties, that also will hamper further development.
Yeah, but in your UN mandate, we see that recognizing the sustainable development is closely linked with what you say, the strong structures, infrastructure, definitely. Some of the other structures, systems, some of the human capitals you mentioned.
The human capital is incredibly important too. Capacity building, the strength of institutions.
Yes.
The rule of law, justice, parliamentary system, that there's a police force, a judiciary system in place, that people feel confident
and most importantly, creating a congenial atmosphere and safe and secure situation in a country is important.
And as you know, Bangladesh has been rocked by some recent events.
Yes, that is what I'm asking.
Which have really shaken people and questioned people have questioned about their identity. There was very much a very common belief, and it's not that it was a mistaken belief, but there was a certainty in the belief that this is a secular state, that it's a very liberal state, and that there is the freedom to practice religions, a tolerance of different religions, in spite of the fact that it is a predominantly Muslim country. There are religious minorities in the country, which were always tolerated and respected.
How UN can support or assist in tackling that menacing problem like violent extremism, countering violent extremism?
I think we have a big role to play, because we have some experience in it. And you may know the Secretary General had a plan of action for
countering
violent extremism that was signed by Bangladesh. Bangladesh has been at the forefront of this agenda and promoting this agenda. And we're working very closely right now with the government and working out a plan of how to address this problem. And that's going to have multiple entry points. One, of course, is going to be, and I always come back to this because it's so important, which is youth. Not just because youth is the future, but youth is part of the problem, in the sense that if they're not given the kinds of opportunities, economic opportunities, employment opportunities, educational opportunities, they will become disaffected and they will become part of the problem. So it's incumbent upon
so what is your message for the young generation?
Well,
or the authorities in place?
As I say, we have to find a way to ensure that they have opportunities, that they have to feel safe and secure. They have to feel that they have a chance to get a good education, and they have a chance to get a good employment, that they can improve their lot in life and their family's lot, and be given those opportunities which they will need to achieve that. But of course, it's not just about money and getting a livelihood. That's a very important part, but there's also a greater sense of community. And the fact that the community has a responsibility to ensure that when there are problems within the community, whether it be with youth or other people, that they're given channels for activities which keep them engaged, profitably engaged and socially engaged, and that there are mechanisms within the community to identify where there are problems. So the state can intervene, whether it's through psychological assistance or social services, whatever might be needed.
So
to
we need
ensure
to have
that
a whole of society approach.
Absolutely. And I think that Sheikh Hasina has been correctly addressing that issue by saying that the problem of terrorism can only be solved if all of the people of Bangladesh are aware of the problem and feel that they are empowered to do something about it. And I think that we have seen very recently that seems to be paying off insofar as people are starting to report some abnormal behavior or suspicious activities in their communities. And I think that's because there's a recognition in society that everyone has a role to play. It's not something you cannot allocate to the security services. It's every citizen in the country. And it's not just Bangladesh. Terrorism is a global threat. And it's something that we all have to be actively involved in countering.
Time to take another short break. Dear viewers, we're taking another short break. We'll be back after the commercial. Stay with us. Dear viewers, welcome back. You're watching Frankly Speaking. My guest is Robert Watkins, UN Resident Coordinator in Bangladesh. Mr. Robert Watkins, we all know that as a country, Bangladesh have been making very significant contribution in peace building, peacekeeping around the world in many operations. So, I mean, how the UN recognize the contribution of Bangladesh in peacekeeping and peace building?
Well, Bangladesh has, as you rightly said, has a long and distinguished history in peacekeeping. It began in 1988 with UNAMOG, the monitoring observer group in
Kuwait.
Following the Iran-Iraq conflict, it was a monitoring group, and then in 1989 in Namibia was the first military contribution to peacekeeping. And since then, your contribution has grown and grown and grown, and it's gone beyond observers, beyond military, to include civilian services as well, like the police. Today we have something like 6,770 military and civilian peacekeepers in the world today, which is an incredible amount and a great contribution from Bangladesh. Bangladesh has been one of the top 3 troop contributing countries to the United Nations over the last decade. and we expect that that's going to continue well into the future. I can say from my own personal experience since I've been here, that's another thing that has really impressed me. And whenever I meet people from the military or from the police, almost without exception, every one of them has had some UN peacekeeping experience. Now that makes my job a lot easier because people already know what is the UN. I don't have to explain what it is or why I'm trying to do this or why I'm trying to do that. They know. They've lived through it, whether it's in Côte d'Ivoire, whether it's in South Sudan, or whether
Congo.
it's in Lebanon, where it was my last assignment, where I worked very closely with Bangladeshi troops in the southern part of the country on the border with Israel. They have a very, very deep understanding of the UN and a tremendous respect for the UN. And as I said, that makes my job.
And I also had an
easier.
opportunity to see the peacekeeping operation in Congo.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
It was back in 2004.
As a journalist?
Yeah, as a journalist,
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Tell
it's
us
quite
about
impressive. So all I can say is that it's been a great contribution, and it's something that we really hope will continue well into the future.
Robert, tell us something about the UN, how the UN Day began.
Yeah, well, of course, the UN was founded on October 24th, 1945, after the Second World War. 60 million people, a continent devastated by conflict. It was a time when the nations came together and said, you know, we really have to do something about this. We have to create a space in which nations can try to come together to talk about their problems without reverting to conflict. So that's formed the basis of the United Nations. So every year since I think it was 1948, we have been celebrating the 24th of October, the founding day, the founding of the Charter of the United Nations. Worldwide, we celebrate it as a way of reflecting on the ideals of the UN, the achievements of the UN, and the challenges that remain for the UN.
Some people are, critical about the United Nations role and the contribution or performance since its creation.
Yeah.
Currently, the United Nations General Assembly is holding its 71st session, is in on 71st session.
Of the General
So,
Assembly.
in the wake of 71st UNGA, how would you view the criticism of the quarter who really don't see that the United Nations is very effective in building peace or conflict resolution or developing, helping or extending support to develop the marginalized countries who really desperately need the support of the United Nations. United Nations is for the powerful nations. What is the message for them?
Well, I think the message is the same for all nations because we are an organization of 193 member states. I think the fact that we're in our 71st year, the General Assembly will be marking the 71st meeting of the General Assembly, that this is in itself testimony to the success of the organization, the fact that it has survived for so long, that people still show up, and it's not like they're not coming anymore to New York. This is an event when all of the nations of the world come together at least once a year. Of course, they come together many, many other times during the year, not only in New York, the headquarters, but in different parts of the world. I think that they keep coming back time and time again means that they believe something is coming out of it. Well, it's very easy to say that the UN is a failure because we haven't solved all the problems of the world. Well, I think that's testimony to the great number of problems that we do have. The UN has perhaps not solved all the problems of the world, but the UN has contributed to improving the life of many people around the world in different countries. And I think the fact that we are here, some 24 UN agencies in Bangladesh, and the work that we are doing that I talked about in the first part of the program also says a lot about how we are helping nations, not only wealthy nations, but nations that are trying to improve their situation. So I think that there have been a lot of successes. We're passing through a time, though, when the nature of conflict is changing dramatically. In 1945, when the UN was created, as I said, we came out of the Second World War where nations were fighting each other. What we're seeing now in modern times is that it's not nations that are fighting each other anymore, but it's communities within nations.
Okay.
And we're confronted with a great number of very destructive conflicts within nations, such as we're seeing in the Middle East, in Libya, in Syria, in Iraq. We have also Afghanistan, South Sudan, Congo. I mean, the list goes on. There are a number of conflicts that sometimes seem that we cannot solve them. But it takes the member states coming together to try to find a way of sorting out their problems in a peaceful way. And that's what the UN is all about, providing the space for the nations to come together.
That's a platform. It's a greater platform.
It's a platform.
So UN is waiting to select its next Secretary General.
Yes.
Can you shed some light on it? How they are going to select the next Secretary General, and what are the challenges lies ahead for him or her?
Yes, it's not an enviable position for any incoming Secretary General, given the state of the world and the challenges that they will face. This is going to be our 9th Secretary General, and basically it's the General Assembly which chooses the next Secretary General on the basis of a recommendation coming from the Security Council. As you know, we have 15 members, 5 of which are permanent members. They will make a recommendation. General Assembly will then endorse or not. We've had 4 what we call straw polls, or informal kind of reviews of the candidates. And that's to give them an idea of how the different countries view the strength of those candidatures. And what we're seeing now is that the number is slowly reducing. There's one leading candidate, but that doesn't mean that that will be the person. Sometimes, there will be someone coming in at the last minute. We really don't know, but we should know early October, when the General Assembly is winding down. We should be able to have a clear picture by then who will be the new Secretary General. The present Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, ends his mandate on the 31st of December, and he's made it very clear that he would like to see a woman. And we've never had a woman as Secretary General of the UN. There are many candidates. 50% of the candidates, in fact, are women.
Yeah.
And so that certainly is something that he's made very clear. That's been very much a part of his expressed wish for the United Nations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
it's been
you
a pleasure.
very much, Robert Watkins, for joining me on this show. Thank you so much. Dear viewers, thank you indeed. You heard about our conversations with Robert Watkins, UN resident coordinator. He's very passionate and very optimistic about the prospect future of Bangladesh, and he looks forward as a UN resident coordinator for Bangladesh in the days to come, and we hope and wish him all the success. Thank you indeed for watching this show, and we invite you to watch our next episode. Until then, to take care and goodbye.